All right. So thank you everyone for joining us in this conversation. I'm very excited about our guest tonight. My name is Dan Lloyd. I'm the founder and president of Minority Millennials. Our organization was founded in 2017 as a tool to bridge the gap between policy and culture. Our mission is to help young people of color access jobs, build wealth, and become civically engaged. We truly believe that if millennials and Gen Z of color understand the power of being civically engaged, not only will it help their personal and professional development, but will also help start to shift the political will and the political power of our region to ensure that not only is our region more equitable, but that our voices are heard. That is not just giving us access, but it's giving us access to make the decisions with those that are already making decisions, so that the next generation, our kids and our grandchildren in the years 2030, 2040, are not still dealing with the same inequities that we have been facing today. It is the 21st century, so we believe in proof of progress. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that not only are we accountable as leaders, but that those that we're working with and the decision makers are accountable for true change. So today we have a very special guest, and I'm excited to talk with. It's someone that I've gotten to know a little bit in the last few months as she's been making her run for town of Hempstead clerk. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Correct. I want to make sure that I have that right. And without further ado, I'll just introduce Miss Olena Nix. So Olena, can you just talk a little bit about the last few days, I would say? I want to kick it off with that. Like, just talk about right now in the midst of your run, and then we'll get into a little bit of your background and also what exactly is the town of Hempstead clerk and what that seat looks like and the role that you would be fulfilling in that. But just give us a little bit about what's going on right now in the past 2 to 3 days.
Okay, so today we are 17 days out from the election, and the last few days have really been a lot about getting out the vote. So speaking to our constituents who we reached back in, June, July, and reminding them that there is an election, and not just that there's an election, it's a local election that will affect them directly. Oftentimes when we have what people consider off-year elections is we don't see the same amount of voters as we do during the presidential. And a lot of times our towns and our communities are very affected by that because we're not coming out to vote. So we really are being left in the dark and having to settle for whomever the elected officials are. So the last few days have been us knocking on doors. I've started at the train station, so I'm up at 5:15 in the morning, and we're there at 6:30, greeting our residents and voters, letting them know that there is a vote, and making sure that everyone has a plan from now until November 2nd about how they're going to vote and how they're going to ensure that their voice is heard.
So can you talk about the journey of how did you get to this place right now where you're in the midst of GOTV, Get Out the Vote, and you're showing, not only are you showing, but you're being a leader as to, for young people of color, again, that's our mission, millennials and Gen Z, that may be scared to run or may look at it as if, that's not something that impacts me. Sometimes I hear this word, and I can't stand anyone say like, that's for squares, this, that, and the third. But you don't realize that regardless if you think it's not for you or not, there is still political positions and decisions being made that impact your family, that impact your community. And we're being naive to think that no one else understands that. And there's been history of hundreds of years of people that understand that. And look how that's impacted us. So, we always try to make sure when we have these conversations to understand, how did you get to the place where you are now? Because that's part of the journey, right? So can you talk a little bit where you're from and a bit of that path that led you to this moment right now?
Absolutely. So I am from the Udell community, and I grew up there, and I really started this when I was 14. So when I was 14 there, I started out at the Planned Parenthood of Nassau County, and I was a teen advocate. It was my first job. If you can only start working when you're 14. And I was working in communities where we saw large rates of STDs and teen pregnancies. So my role was to speak with my peers and start to educate them, especially in areas where the school districts like Uniondale at the time was an abstinence only education system. So there was no comprehensive sex education. And I really started as I was working in Planned Parenthood. We had the opportunities to lobby legislation. We were going to Albany, we were going to Washington, and that experience for me taught me a lot. And it
Mhm.
was an opportunity that many of my peers did not have. But I early on realized that I had the ability to advocate for people who weren't always advocating for themselves, didn't know how, or just didn't feel comfortable doing so, especially coming from a community of color. I also believe that that connection is important to where I'm going now because a lot of people didn't even know that Planned Parenthood had this opportunity for young teens. So, one of my biggest things with Town Clerk is the dissemination of information. And often we are not seeing the information that's available to us. We're not seeing the resources. And the individuals who are currently in office depend on that. They depend on communities of color not to have the access to information, not to understand how contracts, RFPs work, and things of that nature. We have such talented individuals where we need that view of diversity and we're not getting it, and it's the same people getting the same contracts, it's the same individuals getting elected, it's the same business as usual, and we really have to move forward from that. And I understood that very early on, and I have been working ever since to try and combat that.
Love it. I mean, and can you mentioned it just now, but can you just elaborate about what the role of the town clerk will look like? What exactly is that role for anyone that doesn't understand it?
Is the keeper of records, the registrar for the town. She really maintains any of the vital records such as birth certificates, death certificates, marriage, they officiate marriages. More importantly to me is FOIL.
Hmm,
And the FOIL is really important. I'm sorry, just give me 1 second.
no problem.
So sorry about that. The FOIL information is very important because in New York State, we have what's called Freedom of Information Law. And that allows individuals to really have access to any information that gets put out. Now, oftentimes we hear the word transparency,
Hmm.
and that means a lot for us because that's literally it's how the taxes are spent. It's who's getting, the contracts when they come up. It's why they what that process looks like. And as of right now, it's not being publicized the way that it should. We also see a number of developments that are coming to communities and we don't know about them. And it's because there's not enough due diligence to make sure that communities know what's coming. So oftentimes, if you ever are driving by something that's being built, or there's construction, you may see like an orange sign and it has a bunch of words. If you're driving by, you're not going to stop to read that typically.
Yeah.
So when we're building and when there are contractors that are looking to build in communities, we need to make sure that we look to all of our resources to communicate with those residents to say, hey, this development is coming. We are having a public hearing on it. Please come down and express your views because we're the people that are living in these communities. I mean,
Absolutely.
in Unionville, we have seen so many developments that have come, and not enough of our community residents have come out to speak against it because they didn't know that those hearings were happening. So the clerk is really responsible for that information and for the outreach and connection between the town board, and the residents of the towns.
Yeah, that's major. And again, like, what we have talked about is that role between policy and culture. How do we ensure that young people of color understand that if we want social equity within our community, say Uniondale or in the town of Hempstead, and any developments are going in there, they're not going to not only one understand, but two respect our voice if we're not showing up. But it's going to be hard for us to show up if we're not educated and have the information about what's going on. So with that implementation that you're talking about would really be the start of innovation for that office and for that role, to again provide knowledge and provide information to those that may not fully understand the whole process of things and how things get done. Because I always ask people, why is it that, and I love Rockville Center, and I think it's a beautiful area, but can we replicate that type of social equity for communities of color or in majority minority communities? Now, the entire town of Hempstead is not all minority, right? But for our conversation right now, for minority millennials and Gen Z, we always just focus on, who we advocate for in our demographic. And so I think it's important for those that are listening to understand how vital this role is. When you think of a clerk's office, it's not just administration. Like he said, it's access to information. That access to information can then empower and strengthen what the definition of power is. And I like to parallel civic engagement with power, not because of the show, and I was just talking to Justin about this, but the show does provide some clarity as to the political role in a lot of things, right? So Ghost was trying to create a club. Look at all the political games that he had to go to create that. And that's in a TV show. So just imagine what really happens in reality. How do we create a social equity in a nightlife in the town of Hempstead if we're not engaged and understand that our voice is power? They're not going to respect it unless we actually go to the town halls and put in our vote. So that's why it's very important to understand each one of these roles. They all play a part in this. Speaking of which, can you talk a little bit about your process and your journey to even being picked to run for town of Hempstead clerk? Because that can be something that is scary for people. Like they may want to run, but they don't understand what they have to go through, the hoops and the nuances to even be picked for that. Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
So I believe that my journey was a little bit different than some other individuals. And I say that because I have been active in my community and the surrounding communities for a little bit of time. And I think that connection with community is what has driven me to go further. So I sit on the Uniondale Public Library board, and there was an individual who said to me, there isn't, some of the seats are changing in the town board. They're up for election, and I really think you should consider running for it. And I'm like, it's so funny that you say that to me, because I have been interested in how to expand the work that I've been doing to a macro level. So at the time we had a consultant who said, listen, here's some contact information for the Nassau County and New York State Democratic Chair, who is Jay Jacobs. Reach out to him and he'll be able to get you on the right track. And I started speaking with the party, I want to say July of, I know I was wearing a mask, so it was July of last year. um, and it was a few months before I found out that it was the position of clerk I was nominated for through the party. I found out March of this year, 2021. And from that point on, it was a learning process for me. So I think it starts with the motivation to want to do it and believing that this is something you can do. Because even I said, like, this is huge. I don't know if this is something that, they'll see me and envision me in this position. But it's the belief in yourself and understanding that your values and what you want to bring to change for the individuals to come and for the residents now, understanding how powerful that is. And they saw that. I mean, they see it in me continuously to this day. The party really believes in me. And I believe that on November 2nd, it will show that the people believe in me as well. So starting with the party, getting that nomination, and then it was hitting the ground running from there. So making sure we got our petitions done. Each candidate, whether they are an incumbent or they're, coming in to run, have to get petitions signed. And it varies depending on the area and the span of the district. And once you get the petition signed and everything is good, you're on the ballot, and then it's campaign season.
And that's amazing, right? Because it goes back to that 14-year-old girl that was working and volunteering with Planned Parenthood and, and just getting insight into what the process looks like of going to Albany and just, advocating for the needs that you were at that time. Fast forwarding to then becoming a member of the Uniondale Library, fast forwarding to now running for town of Hempstead clerk.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about why you ran for Uniondale Library and how that has had a role in your journey now?
Absolutely. So I it was a position that it was a seat became vacant. There were actually two seats that were up that year. And when I was in my previous years, I worked a lot with the library as a junior friend, and it's something that I know a lot of individuals who have sat on the board have been there for 15 plus years, and understanding that libraries are changing. So people are not just going in for their ordinary books. And the decisions that are made are affecting my age group and the age group to come. So my niece, my nephews, knowing that I have the insight to be able to help with that consultation and the decisions that get made for all stakeholders was very important to me. And that's why I had decided to run. I believe that when we are making decisions for the stakeholders, we have to consider all of them. And if everyone doesn't have the collaborative knowledge to, then that means we need more diversity. And I appreciate my fellow trustees because they have an experience that I don't have of having 15 years and seeing some of the trends that happen. But I also have that insight from being a millennial, working in the modern age and innovation, and being able to give them insight in areas that they may not be familiar with.
Love it. Can you share a few words, a few wise words? I always say that you can't buy wisdom. So, and if you could, it'd probably be my biggest investment. I would put all my money into it. Can you share some wisdom with us about, really to millennials and Gen Z of color, um, that maybe wanting to get more involved civically, or maybe wanting to run for office and feel like they don't have enough experience, that they may not be, they may be too young, that maybe their parents are telling them they don't know what they're talking about, maybe their peers are calling them squares or saying that it's a waste of time. Can you just give us some words of encouragement and wisdom for those that may be really interested in running for office or just getting in civically engaged in their community?
I would say don't doubt yourself. And that is most important to me because you're going to have a lot of people throughout the entire journey, even people that you're close to, that will say, it's not worth it. What are you doing that for? Who may not understand your vision. And I think the best thing to understand is that your vision is not always going to be someone else's vision, but many people can benefit from whatever it is that your vision is. And that to me is most important. I say continue and don't let the first, no discourage you, and understand what it is that you're fighting for. When we step out of the focus of just ourselves and focusing on self, and when we start to focus on others and those around us, that to me is what will continue to motivate you and push you forward. So, and ask questions, even if you don't think you're speaking to the right person, ask questions and it will eventually lead you there. We need more millennials. We need more people who are genuinely leading from their heart and not from self desires. And it is all important. And if it doesn't affect us right now in today's day, today, tomorrow, it's going to affect us in the come future. I mean, we're dealing with so many issues from climate change to access to information. And there are a lot of people that are counting on us to not show up.
Yeah, and it's in a especially in an off year, right? It's a local election, and one thing that we've been telling everyone is that last year we had thousands of people on Long Island, millions of people across the country and the globe march, right, for the murder of George Floyd and for police reform and for things that they felt in their hearts and their minds that needed to change. And we have to ensure that we don't lose that energy, but more importantly, that we don't lose the respect of that type of turnout the next year, right? And 2020 was a monumental year for change and for impact. 2021 has to be even more of a monumental year for change and impact. And, how do we continue to make sure that the energy that was in the people's hearts and minds, especially young people, is translated into vote and change? Because like you said, the let's say those that have had positions of power and have not used that position of power the correct way. I think that's important, right? Is that power is not a bad thing. It's those that, there's a saying that says absolute power corrupts absolutely. But there's another saying that says power just reveals, and to me that resonates more is because it reveals the underlying intent. And those are the people that we have to vote out, regardless of color, regardless of
Party.
party and
Yes.
anything, right? We live in a democracy. We really live in a republic, but we have a democratic setup. And I love America and I love Long Island, and we want to make sure that it is truly equitable, as we were talking before this call, and that everyone has access, equal access to ensuring not only that they reach the American dream, but a quality of life. Then we have to be civically engaged, and we have to ensure accountability for every aspect of that journey. So, Olena, we are supportive of you. We are very grateful that you're running, and we have so many minority millennials and Gen Z this year running across the island. So, if you can just in closing, give us some words for whatever is on your heart and mind, and just to make sure that you that we get the voters out in November 2nd.
Sure. So, and I think what my closing is going to be is like you said, and as your post suggested today, it's one thing to march and to stand up for what we believe in, but we have to put a foundation behind that. And we have to come out to vote in numbers. And I think that the more we understand the positions that are up, the more we understand how important that is to us. So this year, our DA is up, and who the DA makes a huge difference on which cases get prosecuted, which ones don't, which ones, how judges make their decisions. That's important. And that was important to us in 2020. It should be important in 2021. And we need to make sure we come out to show that. We need to make sure that we show up for the things that are important, and don't just choose a candidate because it's the same political, party affiliation as you. Choose a candidate that shares those values that you believe in, and that you can say, I believe that this person will do something for me. Don't go by name recognition. Don't go by, promises. Go by the candidate that has proven leadership and has shown what they will look to get done. So.
Love it. Love it. Thank you again so much, Olena. And with Minority Millennials, we strongly believe that all Long Islanders deserve access to good paying jobs, truly affordable housing, and economic opportunity through transparent community-led development. Our motto is proof of progress. If in 5 years we're sitting here and talking about solutions for the same problems, then we have not done our job, and we cannot continue to do that. And that's why we advocate for leaders to expand their perspectives and fully understand both the internal and external forces that shape community of color. And we are again excited for this conversation. Thank you to Olena Nix for sharing her words of wisdom and encouragement to those that are listening. And please get out and vote November 2nd. When does early voting start? It's October.
October 23rd to the 31st. So next Saturday starts early voting, and you actually have 2 days left to request an absentee ballot. It has to either be, sent in, postmarked by the 18th, or you can drop it to any polling location, Board of Elections by Election Day.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you so much. Best of luck. It's coming down to the wire. Hopefully we'll see, what we'll be talking about come November 3rd.
Yes. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.